go. How's it going, everyone? Welcome. This is all going to be about baby sleep. We've got a couple of chats this week, actually. Today, obviously, right now, and then Thursday, and then Sunday, all at 8 p.m. to make everything nice and easy. But I know people can't always get involved all the time. So it should be good. So hopefully this works, and I can actually get people live. We're going to feed in some of your questions as well. And here we go. Let's see if this works, Kate. Let's see. So we're just saying hi, everyone. And there we go.
Hiya.
Yeah, and your audio is working as well. Brilliant. Okay. Let's see if I can even turn the phone up. There we go. Perfect. Oh, thanks so much. Your background is so much more exciting than mine.
Oh.
You've been doing so many Zoom calls, obviously.
I know,
it's amazing.
it's my comfy corner, which if you look too closely, you'll spot the whiskey. And
There we go. Perfect. So thanks so much for taking the time to join in this very kind of spontaneous chat almost. So let's I guess just dive straight into it and just kind of start with the classic origin story of how you get involved in sleep consultancy, and then we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, cool, no worries. So I set up Sleep Time Baby, my sleep consultancy, about four and a bit years ago, and it's kind of a sort of a tale of sort of fate and kind of evolution in a way. So I was working in London, doing a job that was really draining. I wasn't really getting much from it, and my son, who was around 2 at that time, just wasn't sleeping, and so I was completely exhausted. We were all trying to function and didn't know what to do. So I resigned my job with nothing to do, and then we hired a sleep consultant, and within 3 days all of our problems were fixed. He was back sleeping. Wow. And I was like, oh my God, why have we waited 2 years to do this, firstly? And why didn't we know what was going on? And to be completely honest, whilst the sleep consultant solved all the issues, she wasn't brilliant. And I was like, I could do this. I feel like now I understand what we were doing wrong. I want to sort of help people understand more about what they could do right to help them sleep. So I trained up because there was a course by a lady called Dana Oberman, who's one of the big sleep gurus over in the States. So she was in London doing a course, did the course, which is really comprehensive kind of training, and kind of off I went. And it was born out of the kind of want to help people more, because I was sitting in a sort of a 9-to-5 job, doing work for other people, and it didn't really kind of fulfill me. Whereas now I know that I'm helping people understand, I'm helping educate people around sleep, helping people make their own decisions, and guiding them through that if they need to. And it's just really, really rewarding. And 4.5 years later, what's brilliant about it is that no one case is the same. And every child is individual and they need to be treated as such. And it's just fab to be able to just hear the kind of responses when people get their sleep back. It's it's changed my life. All of this kind of saved my marriage. We've had sort of comments, and that's just amazing. So it's been quite a bit of a journey, but I still love what I'm doing. So there you go.
Well, conveniently, Ramina is also here, who just put down little Emma, because it's obviously a million degrees here, so just having a bit of a tough time. But that's interesting, because when you obviously talk about sleep, and obviously then every single case is different. Is there any kind of, I guess, kind of myths or weird expectations about what a sleep consultant can do? Because obviously 3 days seems amazing to just be able to be bam, bam, bam. So are there some or maybe let's say some classic go-tos of things that are maybe catching people up that you see?
Do you mean in terms of how we would help and how it would kind of work?
Yeah, I guess how do you generally start to break down what it could be out of all the millions of things that could potentially happen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the kind of the fundamentals, and this is sort of my kind of stance on this has kind of evolved as time has gone on, because, you know, classically the first thing people will talk about is self-settling, because that's that kind of phrase that's harped on about the whole time. And, you know, it's important, but what's important is if it's in reference to how the child sleeps. So you want to look at the settling process, and if a child sleeps well and is, let's say, fed to sleep or rocked to sleep, that's fine. Like, that's just not an issue if the you know, child is sleeping well enough at night that the parents are happy with and the child is developing well. So you have to kind of look at the settling situation in terms of how they're falling asleep. And then really for me, it's then considering the environment. So things like the temperature, the ideal temperature for a child to sleep in is often a lot lower than you think. So it's between 16 to 21 degrees, which at the moment is just bonkers, and no one should have any expectations of their rooms being that cold. And if they've got them that cold, I want to know how, because it's impossible, isn't it? So it's looking at things like the temperature of the room where manageable, and things like kind of what they're sleeping in. You know, so for example, you might find a child that's swaddled for too long, which might struggle with that situation in terms of having the freedom to move, or there could be an issue with perhaps the lighting in the room. That's a classic kind of little thing that people kind of talk about, like blackout blinds, but when we talk about sleep and darkness, it needs to be so super dark to encourage a child to sleep kind of, well, to settle down well, and not to kind of wake when those early morning kind of rises can creep in. So the littlest light crack can startle a baby awake or a child awake. And in the daytime as well, that can really help with that. So environment's kind of also really key. And then the sort of the routine in the loose sense of the word, because I'm kind of like to apply more of a flexible approach to kind of daytime routine, because it has to be child dependent and it has to sort of work with how the child behaves. So I look at kind of awake time. So how long can a child stay awake for before needing to sleep again? And you can either do that through averages or through you know, what the child shows you. And then you need to encourage the right amount of daytime sleep during the day, because a child that sleeps too much in the day, which was a client I had today, actually, that I was like, actually, I think your child's sleeping too much in the day, which isn't often a conversation I have with people. And that's why it's waking up a lot at night, because it's that balance between nighttime and daytime sleep. And then on the flip side, if your child is not sleeping well enough at night, then you'll find that they'll be overtired, and overtiredness is one of the biggest killers of sleep, because it makes them hard to settle, and it can cause wakings just with the way that the body kind of keeps that overtiredness kind of overnight. So those are there is other things to consider, such as nutrition, but I'm not necessarily qualified enough to kind of comment on that, but we need to kind of consider it as part of the bigger picture. But generally those are the main things that we kind of
amazing. Yeah, it's very, very comprehensive. I should say as well, for all the people that joined in the live now, if you do have any questions on your mind as well, you can put them in the comments, and we'll kind of round those out at the end. It's interesting to hear more about the routine, and obviously if self-settling is the thing that everyone kind of bangs on about. But when is there like a rough time that people should start considering a routine? Like, how is there any sort of like yardstick, as it were, to
Well, this is where it gets into kind of parental preference, and that needs to be completely respected. So you might get the mum that just wants to do everything on the fly, or the parents that want to do everything on the fly, and therefore everything is kind of flexible. And again, if that works and the sleep is fine, then there's no issues with that. It's when you kind of look at a child that's, you know, drastically overtired because they're not getting the chance to sleep, that a routine can be really helpful. And that's why I always try to say that if you from birth, you can in a sense, in a very low level, start to think about routine. Like, I'm not trying to put any pressure on anyone. It's just knowing that you know, your newborn child can only stay awake for a max of 45 minutes, from, you know, to an hour between that and about 6 to 10 weeks, and then the awake time extends. And in a sense, that's the start of building a routine, but
Okay.
on the low level of it all. And you know, they're kind of the turning point to start really considering things like bedtime routines, and looking at perhaps an earlier classic bedtime is probably, again, somewhere between that 6 to 10 weeks, because that's when the kind of the shift happens, that the body recognizes the difference between day and night. So before then, it's like, do you know what, there's no kind of body clock happening, there's no circadian rhythm, it's called. And so that's when they can be awake for loads in the night, but they can sleep loads in the day. All of this, they just don't have any concept of what's kind of going on. But around that sort of turning point, that's when, if you can encourage them to create a rhythm by getting them out in the daylight, and, you know, kind of dimming the lights towards nighttime, then it can help to build that routine. So from then onwards, I think it's a good idea, but it needs to be what's right for you. So, but on a soft sense, you can start it from day one, really. Obviously.
Yeah. And with any kind of, because I mean, speaking from our own experience, I guess you kind of end up going, because they're changing all the time, obviously. You kind of tend to, we were finding that we would kind of pick one thing, or we'd pick a few things basically, and then one would work. And so we'd be like, okay, great, well, we'll just keep doing that. And then things would start not to work, and we would almost like go back to stage one, and then there'd be a lot of faffing around, wasn't there? But yeah, so I kind of forget my trail of thought. Maybe that was just more of a comment. But
well, it's actually a really common conversation. So I mean, I don't deal distinctly with children before the age of 4 months. And at that point, even at 4 months, it's very low level, gentle kind of sleep adjustments, rather than, you know, kind of training, because they're still really tiny. But I have so many conversations with people at 6 months where they go, do you know what? We used to be able to just put them to sleep, put them down, and they'd sleep through the night, or they'd wake up once, and now they're up like 3 or 4 times a night, and I'm back to kind of feeling like I'm in a newborn phase. And the reason for that is just because, you know, as you sort of mentioned, they're constantly changing, and you know, that first year is just beset with something around the corner, you know, whether it's, you know, teeth, movement, development, you know, everything can impact kind of what happens with sleep. But generally what tends to happen is that you start to think that things that were working before aren't, because their awareness is changing. So you know, up until about kind of 4 months, you can you know that, well, you can sense that they don't know what's kind of necessarily happening. They're just in this rhythm, and their sleep patterns are quite simplistic, and that's in that fourth trimester. And so at the 4 month mark, when the sleep patterns change, which is the 4 month regression, that's when you can start to feel that things don't work anymore. And that's just because their sleep's different, their awareness of the world is much, you know, kind of altered, and therefore the old tricks don't work. And alongside with that, sometimes you've got a parent that might be working on a sort of a 5 month schedule for a 6 month old, and that means it's not going to work, because they're very different in terms of they're not very different, but there is difference between their sleep needs and their awake times, and you need to evolve with the child and recognize the difference. I suppose the wrap up of that is to say that if that is a situation you're in, then looking at kind of understanding, which is obviously the key thing, is the most important part, but also about then looking at kind of what's going on with settling, because, you know, self-settling is never going to change. Self-settling is always going to be a skill that they have, and if you can build that up to begin with, then it's not as if that's going to stop working, because it's independent and therefore they're not reliant on anything. So it's good to consider that as part of, if you're suffering, I suppose.
Yeah, very good. Is there anything coming to your mind?
No, for me, the what I wanted to ask, particularly, it was about what to do when I think a lot of parents have this issue. You were mentioning that how things change, but what to do when kids are slightly older, you know, almost like a year older, you already kind of have a routine and you feel like they already, whatever the routine is, and all of a sudden it changes. For example, they sleep almost all night, and all of a sudden they start waking up at 3 in the morning for 2 hours,
Yeah.
and then there's nothing you can do because it's not they might not even want to play. They just awake, and it's not even feeding in some cases. So we've had customers like asking this and saying, "Well, I don't know what to do because I don't know how." They just want to be awake, and then they just
Oh.
they're looking at me, and then I try to put them down, and they don't want to go down, and then a couple of hours later they go back to sleep.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's more like how to deal with that, because I find obviously your lack of sleep, so you're so tired, you in that time in that situation you don't know even how to act.
Yeah, no, exactly. And in that situation, and it's, everything's understood, you just do whatever you can to like get them back to sleep. And sometimes it takes that step back to go, okay, why is the issue happening? What could it be down to then make the changes to address it? So it is kind of looking at those sort of key parts of, is it that that your child is getting too much sleep in the day and they're waking up because they're ready to kind of party in a sense for a little while before they go back down again because they've had half an hour extra in the day, or or is it the opposite, that they've not had enough sleep and therefore they're waking up overtired and kind of needing that sort of that help to settle back, but they're so kind of almost worked up with the overtiredness they find it really hard to kind of relax and settle down. So daytime can have a big impact on kind of what's going on there. And then it's sometimes it's just about kind of looking at what the settling looks like, and then what the kind of subsequent sort of settling in the night might be. So one of the kind of the simplest tricks people can do is think about how they respond to their child in the night. And that's not saying don't respond. It's like saying, okay, right, my child is, I don't know, so the client today I had was 8 months old, and the little boy's waking up like 3 or 4 times a night, and I was like, well, it's what are you doing, how are you responding? And she's feeding him at night time. I'm like, well, that's fine, you can feed a baby at 8 months, but does he need like 3 feeds? Would just 1 be okay? And so we sort of talked about it, and so we've got this kind of allegation of 1 bottle across a certain sort of time period, but it's about how you resettle after that feed. So quite classically, a lot of people will go, okay, I'm gonna feed, and then they'll go back to sleep, and I'll put them down, and they'll put them down completely asleep. And if you can actually pop them down a little bit awake, then that can help to sort of almost them know what's happening, because otherwise, with the way that the sleep cycles work, so these are the sort of the 45-minute cycles that a baby over 4 months goes round. At the end of the cycle they wake up slightly, so if they've been put down fully asleep, then it can be more of a likelihood that they're going to wake up subsequently, especially in the early hours of the morning, because that's the lighter part of the sleep. So it's almost a bit like focus at one time to help the rest of the night. So but it could be a number of things, but those are perhaps some thoughts on common.
I mean, of course, it is personal, isn't it? Each person, you have a routine, so you might be doing something different than everyone. It's just that I find that a lot of people have this problem, and then because I think you're right. I think it's to do with the amount of hours they sleep, because it's very confusing when you try to look at books. For example, we have so many sleeping books, and then we read, and each book says a thing. One says they should have 2 naps. One says let them sleep. The other one says, oh, they can have a really long nap. So it's really confusing when you're like a mom, and especially if you're a first-time mom, you've never done this, and then you feel like, oh, I should be reading all these books that say all these things, and none really give you an answer. So it's difficult.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, we read all the books as well. I think everyone does, and it's, actually just thinking about that, then a lot of the books are very old school. There are a range, but they're often written quite a while ago, and I think things have kind of changed. And what a book doesn't give you is the ability to adapt. And I think that's why perhaps over the last few years, sleep consultants have become so kind of popular and kind of out there, because hopefully we're here as a resource for people to kind of go, well, I thought I should be doing this, but actually it's not, it doesn't work for my child. And you're like, okay, it doesn't work for your child, perhaps it's because of that. And there's no kind of questions to ask in a book, or no other options. They're quite definitive about a routine and what works. And I think sometimes you need to find your own style and, you know, kind of what you want to sort of get from it, because there's a, you know, variety of different approaches and there's a variety of different kind of ways of looking at it. So you've got to find, yeah, the key kind of personal thing for you. But yeah, it's tricky. It's really hard to find your way through it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things, and parents, you know, struggle with not being able to sleep, and you know, knowing all these things, but like when to put your baby out of the room, and then you feel bad because you want to have your baby with you, because you know, you think, oh, you know, they only little for so long, but then you know, actually, in our personal experience as parents, I find that Emma slept, our daughter has slept with us for a long time in our room. She slept on the floor, actually. She hated the cot. And only went to her room a month ago, less than a month ago. So she's over a year old. And only now she sleeps through the night. Because she's in a different room.
Yeah. And that's it. It's kind of, you're right. We get given this kind of either our own pressure or the peer pressure around us. And actually there was a question from because I do a Q&A on a Monday, and someone said to me about a 6.5-month-old and whether it was a good idea to move them into the room. It's like, actually, you know, if you think about your own sleep and how children sleep, independence is kind of good. So if they want to kind of roll around and move, then having their own space to do that is great. And we make noises in our sleep. So actually we could be, yes, in the younger age bracket, and I absolutely follow the Lullaby Trust guidelines, 6 months earliest, keep them in the room, because there's massive benefit for that. But you know, kind of after that point, they just need their own space, and then, you know, they can have a little, you know, some children will just sort of wake up, have a little squeak, and then they'll go back to sleep. And if you're in the room with him, you're like, oh gosh, right, okay, I'm coming. Yeah, well, and then you kind of cause a different problem. So yeah, it's all about individual decisions, but I do think that children often do kind of sleep better in their own space. But after that,
yeah, they sleep better, and also you sleep better, and it's almost like a result that then you are less sleep deprived. I find that, well, not in a relationship in particular, but a lot of relationships get broken or damaged by this, because they don't sleep, you're tired, you feel miserable. I remember when Emma wasn't sleeping, I just honestly wanted to throw her out of the window, literally. And I love my baby very much, and I said to myself, I can't do this anymore. She cried, you know what I mean, like some days are harder than others, and then some days as a mom especially, because I could hear her cry, I can't. So I can see how that's can affect relationships. So it's so important to sort it.
Yeah, because it's, and actually I was at the same call as today, I was like saying to the mum, I was like, yes, it's really important that your baby sleeps, but it's really important for you as well, because, you know, it's all linked in with, you know, well, from the child's point of view, development, you know, happens a lot at night, and how they kind of then eat during the day can often be altered by, you know, if they're too tired to kind of eat. But then when we come into kind of adult sleep and the sort of the other issues that are associated with bad sleep, you know, whether it's kind of mental health problems, there are, you know, anxiety issues that creep up, there are other kind of more, you know, bigger health issues that can arise if you don't sort of value your own sleep. And I think that's one of the things that I sort of want to kind of promote, is that actually the sleep is just, it's like, it's there, it's at the bottom of the hierarchy of needs. It's like, you know, kind of food, water, sleep. It's so important, and sometimes I think we forget about that, and actually it's important to put the right sense of value on it, really. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this has been really beneficial, but on the fly, making it all up, obviously. on our end, obviously.
Well done.
Yeah. So, how can people get in touch with you? Give us all your handles and.
Yeah, because when we had issues with Emma, we struggled to find a sleep consultant. I'm gonna tell you, it was very difficult, and we looked everywhere, so we couldn't find them. So it would be lovely if you could just tell people how to reach you.
Absolutely. So yeah, on Instagram I'm sleep.time.baby. So you can find me on there. I try all of my kind of social media. I'm on Facebook as Sleep Time Baby as well, and it's sleeptimebaby.co.uk. All of my posts and all of my information is all meant to be kind of helpful. I do a Q&A every Monday. So after this, I've got about 40 questions, I think, to answer on my question sticker from my stories today, which is, I think people find really helpful. And in my bio, you can find a link to sort of download my sleep needs guide. So when I was talking earlier about awake times, that guide will give you a kind of a rough average for age brackets up to sort of 3 and onwards. So that can be a kind of a really useful resource for people. I work on a kind of a one-to-one basis. I run an online sleep school, so that's my next one starting on Friday. So that's where people can join in with kind of my online course, and I support them through it over a 2-week period. So that's my new thing that's been happening over kind of lockdown, was kind of just to help people on a kind of a value-driven way, so doing kind of group coaching. So if anyone's interested, then get in touch or give me a follow and we can do it more.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Definitely. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for all the people that have been watching as well, which is always nice to see. And I think that wraps it up. I have no really good sign off, so I might just leave that to you, and then we'll end it there. So any final words?
Thank you very much for having you. It's always kind of fun having a chat. So I appreciate joining.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll try and set something up in the future as well.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Lovely. All right. Take care then.